Welcome to SportsLit. I'm Neil Acharya.
And I am Nathan Sager.
Page 158. Save for a short prologue, that's how far into Perdita Felicien's biography you have to read before finding the mention of track and field, or as we call it now, athletics. You see, she has a lot more to tell you about. Those who follow sport intently know Perdita as the 2003 IAAF World Champion hurdler. The casual fan remembers Perdita, Canadian Olympian, who faltered at Athens 2004 in the 100-meter hurdles final before a worldwide audience. But those that read My Mother's Daughter, a memoir of struggle and triumph, will get the comprehensive story when it's released on March 30th, almost a full year after its COVID-delayed initial release date of April 14th, 2020. The recipe of a good sports memoir is really universal to what makes a good memoir across any spectrum: the narrative, the nuance, and the details. Above all, a compelling and truthful base. One of the best in the past decade or so, in my opinion, was 2009's Open by Andre Agassi, ghostwritten by J.R. Moringer. My Mother's Daughter shares some of that DNA. And aside, a small part of that is due to the nature of her sport. She was only hyper-covered for a short time, as is the case with many Olympians. The spotlight can sear the ground they walk on for 2.5 weeks every 4 years, and then poof, they are gone. So there is a lot that is new here. Not like an athlete bio from one of the major sports league. Those are, as Nate would say, the ground is well tilled on. And basically, this is only a small factor in the overall factors of what makes this a great book. When you get down to it, Perdita honestly and earnestly illustrates an immigrant's tale by capturing her mother's journey from St. Lucia to Canada, where she began working as a nanny for wealthy Canadians. They got to know Catherine while vacationing in her country and sponsored her to come here. Through Perdita's description of Catherine's experience, you get an idea of what it's like to be dismissed and disregarded as having no real value other than your role, but also what it's like to discover a new land with the buffer of your own community and the lens of an outsider. What makes it warm, what makes it cold, what makes you grateful, and what makes you pound your fist. Perdita does justice to the cultural fabric of the country in a similar way to Francis Ford Coppola when he did it in Godfather 2 with Italian Americans. You can feel it, even if it doesn't directly intersect with what's relatable to your own lineage, economically or culturally. And the patois is a fantastic touch, too. In writing this book, Perdita adds an important layer to the nation's history. Through her family story, you can draw out how the Caribbean diaspora has contributed and shaped Canadian culture at large. Focusing on athletics alone for a second, it's valuable for people to know that, for example, Ben Johnson was from Jamaica. 1996 100-meter gold medalist Donovan Bailey was born in Jamaica. And the 4x100-meter winning relay team in those Olympics that he was a part of and he anchored was also, or did he lead off, Nate? Was he the anchor or did he lead off?
I think Bailey anchored it.
Anchored, yeah, okay, just making sure. Yeah, Bruni Surin, Haiti, Robert Esme, also Jamaica, Glenroy Gilbert, Trinidad and Tobago. And that just scratches the surface. On the women's side, Charmaine Crooks, Angela Isianko, they can claim the same. Canadian athletics is where it is in large part because of where it came from. So as we hail them, let's hail the heritage from which they hail. Perdita was born here, but she shares that common heritage. How it translates to her mother's travails and success here, how Cathy's sacrifice allowed Perdita to fit in and then excel as a first-generation Canadian is a big reason why I could see this book being part of the curriculum in English classes going forward. Her mother's hardships and small triumphs as a new Canadian are one of the key avenues which make up this roadmap of Perdita's life to date. Remember, she's only 40. There are tough subjects like love, distance, and reconciliation associated with her adoptive father, Bruce, the search for her biological dad, David, and even athletics fits in here, something that came to her like second nature, sure, but it was also where her Olympic dream was shattered, and it led to several years of harbored bitterness. This is a study that I'm certain we will find out was a result of a lot of hard work and dedication. And speaking of dedication, Perdita's schedule is rammed right now. In addition to working at CBC as the occasional host of Road to the Olympic Games, gotta turn that phone off. She also hosts a new athletics show on TVO called All Around Champion, which she's shooting right now. It's a kids competitive sports show, and they're 12 to 14 hour days. And so she's making time within that to talk to us this day, so we're happy for that and grateful. And to top it off, she and journalist husband Morgan Campbell balance their busy schedules while raising young Nova, who is about to turn 2 years old. That's their daughter. When she is a little older, someone may ask about her mom, the 10-time national champion, the world champion, the Olympian, and she can answer back with the full story, as the Ianla Van Zandt quote says to begin this book. One of the most valuable things a mother can give her daughter is her story as a woman. And that's what Perdita does for Nova, but also what she does for her mother, too.
Indeed, Neil. Absolutely second your suggestion that my mother's daughter should be on school curricula. While here in Ontario, where we do the show from, it's, imperative to make BIPOC stories, immigration stories, and women's stories, fully part of helping young people at an impressionable age develop a sense of common humanity and be open to learning about people whose circumstances differ from theirs. What does every teacher say about the students? I get them to buy in and care about this. What does every student in high school usually say at least once? When are we ever going to need to know this? Well, you need to have empathy and emotional intelligence. Those are lifetime skills. As you mentioned, Felicien's mom, Cathy Browne, was in that first generation of arrivals from the islands. And she took the chance on Canada, this cold, distant land, because to her as a young woman in the 1970s, it represented, quote, opportunity and adventure, even with the strings attached, such as, precarious work, exploitative employers, being a single mom at time, and also having to have the strength to disengage and get away from intimate partner violence. Although Felicien shows that even a domineering dad, his behavior came under the heading of hurting people hurt. Felicien told the CBC a while ago, while she was assisting a charity drive for a women's and family shelter in London, Ontario, she was not open to this. Well, she was an active athlete, and that's understandable. There's enough to deal with when, every time you get into the block, you probably feel like the weight of the country's expectations are right on your scapula muscles. But being a world champion athlete, it doesn't remove the right to privacy and to work through those issues on your own time. Those are uncomfortable subjects, but they need to be out and discussed, because it's a crucial part of giving the next generation the notion of public interest and supporting people. You put texts such as My Mother's Daughter or the Nunavut Set lacrosse movie, The Grizzlies, in front of young eyes and minds, and it helps with understanding how one's outlook and expectations, change when they have, impoverished circumstances. You may be a little reluctant to, reach for it. Like Felicien describes, being reluctant to do track and field when she was a young girl, and the other girls who ran the relay with her having to literally drag her down the hall to the gym to get her sign up. It is awesome that Perdita Felicien is telling her and Cathy Browne's story on their terms. Now, as a general rule, Neil, we and I, we don't rate the books we feature. There's enough of that out there that people don't need to put a number on everything. I think that's overdone. Our reading it is the rating. There's lots of places out there where you can crowdsource how many stars in a 5 a book should get, or perish the thought. Just tune out all that galaxy brain. But when we were sent a review copy, I guess around February 2020, as you mentioned, Big Rona pushed the release back for a year, just like the Tokyo Olympics. And we bunkered down with it. For me, this was a really affecting read. One you could not put down, and in another sense of the term, sometimes had to put down to allow all the feels to marinate. Because it went deep down into the daughter-mother bond, which was special, I guess, for Perdita Felicien and Cathy Browne, because Felicien was her mom's first Canadian-born child when she came into the world in 1980. As a male reader, it definitely showed all the different dimensions of the mom-daughter relationship. Maybe want to be a better older brother to my sister, who's the same age as Felicien and also has her own family now, and hopefully a better large adult son to my mom, whose name is Cathy. Now, Neil, of course, you mentioned how Felicien's a world champion. Just to add a little Canadian context, as you mentioned, sort of Olympic athletes can come and go, but her legend endures because she was the first Canadian woman to win a gold medal. In fact, the first to just get on the medals podium at the World Athletics Championship when she won the 100 meters hurdles in 2003, and in 2004, she was also the nation's first female gold medalist at the World Athletics Indoor Championship championships in the 60 meters hurdles. You started taking the long view. Now it's almost been 2 decades. She was kind of out in front of it because Canada, for people who don't know, we're kind of more of a Winter Olympics nation than a Summer Olympics nation, and it really wasn't until the 90s that we really took athlete development seriously. We were kind of just like, okay, go get that participation ribbon. Ironically, when the boomer generation were all in their competitive years. Just kidding, but not really. I think I'm good if you ever can find it a book, and I know, bringing up this name when we're about to talk to a Canadian, track and field legend, it might be like listing Lord Voldemort on a reference to your application to Hogwarts. But if you ever find Speed Trap by Charlie Francis, it'll be a good description of why Canada was a straggler in international sport up until the 90s when we started to invest more in it.
And Nate, why don't you just tell the listeners who Charlie Francis is?
Charlie Francis was the coach of Ben Johnson and the first guy who really had a program to bring out our better in track and field. But obviously his methods were controversial even before Seoul in 1988. Anyway, so that's, like I say, Felicien she came up, when there wasn't necessarily, huge funding and stuff like Quest for Gold and Own the Podium. Back then it was kind of like, well, you hopefully showed out in high school and with your track club, as she did when she was a dominant, force in Ofsa. And we started hearing about her in the 90s when she was like winning like the 100 and 200 and the 100 hurdles at Ofsa, and went off. And then you hoped someone would go off to the NCAA and get the right coach who wouldn't, sacrifice the athlete's long-term development for the glory of winning the conference title or whatever. Now, so that was how she came up, and now we're seeing, more Canadians do well on the international athletic stage. We'll just yada yada over the Olympic experience. But yeah, she stands alone. Only 4 Canadian women have ever been on the medals podium at the World Championships, the one that's held in odd number of years. And I think Brianne Thiessen-Eaton, the heptathlete and pentathlete's the only other one to win a gold at the Indoor Worlds. Ultimately, you are what you do. And Felicien is using the platform she started building by being a world champion hurdler to, share a story of sacrifice, striving, struggle in sport, and one that's thought-provoking about, maybe ways we can all, make a little bit more of a contribution to, give other people a bit more equality of opportunity. Read a great story today about how Alphonso Davies, the Canadian footballer, is a standout for Bayern Munich, and how he's, as someone who was born in a refugee camp, doing all this work to help resettle refugees. And he's just 20 years old, and he's already taking that on. So anyways, to the point, we are grateful, to finally talk about a book. Long time coming, well worth the wait. And I, by the way, Neil, I have a shameless plug to make.
Please.
I've been called a shameless plug many times, and it's never stopped hurting. But no, this kind of needs like a double Simpson screenshot of like Marge holding the "So you've decided to ruin your life" pamphlet, and also Homer talking to Bart, "Your ideas intrigue me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter." I have a Substack.
Well, now you can.
I have a Substack now. It's called Nate Freak Sports. Planning to write about 4 times a week with all the answers to esoteric sports questions no one asked. So follow it at n8sager.substack.com.
And that's like Neat Freak? Is that like a play on Neat Freak?
Yeah, because I saw the store one day when I was on the GO train going home. I was like, all right. I'm finally having that weirdly spelled short form of my name. I can finally use it for something.
You know what? Check it out, Nate. That's awesome that you started that. It's as shaky as the media industry is right now, there's a lot of new avenues for people to explore and get their voice out, and I'm applauding you for that. So listeners, please check out Nate's Substack at the info he just gave you. Also, Nate will continue to write Nate's notes, which have always been a good accompaniment to this podcast, and we'll eventually get those up on our site. And I just want to bring up our site quickly before we do get to Perdita, because you can buy all the books you hear about through a link on our site, and yeah, check it out. You can listen to all the episodes. It has links to all the different platforms. So go to sportslit.ca for that. And yes, thank you again for tuning in, and we cannot wait to talk to 2003 IAAF World 100-meter hurdles champion, Perdita Felicien. Welcome back to SportsLit, Nate. Of course, we've been looking forward to this for over a year now, as I'm sure Perdita has been. Perdita, welcome to SportsLit.
Hey, hi guys.
Hey, listen, I'm going to get right into the questions because I know you're on limited time. So I want to know how much trial and error went into releasing this book in the way you wanted it to come across.
Oh, a lot. Well, first, it was supposed to be tied up with the Olympics, and we saw what happened there, right? So right. It was delayed a year because of COVID, like everything else was. And so it's nice to finally, have that fall start last year, like that pun, and then get back to really having it ready to go in like a few days, really.
In terms of the way, your voice really comes across well in this. So, I mean, how did you find that? I mean, you obviously, you're everyone knows you're the athlete, but how did you become this great writer?
Yeah, I've always felt like I was a strong writer, and when I decided to tell the story in 2014, I didn't really trust it to anyone else because, I talk about things I've never discussed as an athlete, and it's really sensitive, and I talk about, being a child witness to domestic abuse and not having a home and so many different things. And, I really knew I had to dig deep, and I wanted to do it justice, and so there's no ghostwriter. It's all my words, my thoughts, my research. And I also went to the University of Chicago's writer studio. So they have a 2-year creative writing certificate. And I sat in the classroom for 2 years and wrote this thing. It took me a total of 4, almost 5. But I'm really, really proud because, I approached it as an author, as a writer. And all due respect, it's not a jock book. It takes you halfway through the story to get any track and field, any real sport.
Right.
That's by design.
Yeah, and that was some curious because you drop into some references to it. What was specific to that program at the University of Chicago that really helped you, sharpen the tools to shape and edit, this really well written book?
Yeah, I think what I got structure. So I had an instructor. I had peers who would critique my work, give me their feedback. I was reading a ton of creative nonfiction, memoir, short stories, and I was just consumed by it. I've always loved to read. I've always loved to write. I mean, ever since I was like a tween, I would keep a diary, and so writing was always something I thought I would eventually get to one day, and I finally have. So that program really gave me the structure. And in fact, I'm having a launch on the night of the release, and I remember it's been like 5 years since I've been in the program, like 2016. I remember messaging all my not teammates. I'm still a jock, right? Messaging all my classmates. And they're like, no, we'll be there. Like, we waited 5 years plus for this story. We're going to be there to back you up. So that's really exciting.
Well, the mention of the diary may answer my next question. And there's intricate details in this book that really draw out the narrative. The pink knitted outfit your mom had you in to meet David, I believe it was. What Vanette was wearing at the airport when she came to Canada, and the scent of the overripe bananas in your mom's kitchen when you had to tell her about the undisclosed injury. Was that all from, Do you have a photographic memory, or is that diary?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think that's one thing that a lot of people wonder, like, how do you know all these details? It's really, finite, granular details. And a lot of it is through oral history, right? So, my job as a reporter, I'm also trained reporting, and I went to, to Seneca, to be a sports broadcaster. So those tools really came in handy. And I had to really just interrogate the people who were, part of those scenes and multiple people and, cross-reference things. And I did a lot of research. I flew to St. Lucia multiple times, went to their archives, went to look at old newspapers in Oshawa, Ontario to see what was the climate like when my mom arrived, what was happening. And so I will say the stuff about what my family wears is really easy because we dressed, have you seen the cover of my book? We dressed pretty eccentrically, it's eccentrically. It's like, we always dressed up for a thing. And so what my sister wore when she first arrived to Canada, that was a big deal for my mom. That was a big deal for my grandmother. And I remember what she wore, right? So that was my personal memory. But a lot of those things was me piecing together the memory of other people and putting all those things together into a scene.
And what universal truths do you hope readers find through your, telling of your, the long road to, I guess, happiness for your family?
I think that we're human and we're people and we're messy. Our lives are messy. And even though we try to make them look really neat and curated on Instagram, it's not the case. It is also the truth that, especially for my family, it really doesn't matter how you begin. It doesn't matter what your origin story is, right? It really matters what you become and who you want to be. And my mother wanted to be more than, a young child who was pulled out of school at the age of 12 so she could sell on the beach to rich white people to help her family make a living in St. Lucia. She wanted more than that. She wanted more than that for her children. And we got more than that because she was able to pursue it and to go in that direction, even though the road to it was really paved with hurdles.
Well played. There's a fairness to the prose, and I think it's probably best and you talked about it just a moment ago about things not being so cut and dry. Everything's messy, and there's a fairness to the prose probably best exemplified in the context around Bruce. Showing both sides of him, how extremely loving he was. He'd let you choose the TV channel and, kiss you on the forehead and go to all your meets and pay for the hotel. And then there was the other side too. So how did that play out in the writing process? Was that one of the harder things? I mean, were the things you leaned on from the University of Chicago course that helped you with that part, or was it just did it just flow out naturally?
It was really difficult, and Bruce, is my dad, and it was really difficult talking about him because he's extremely complex, and like you just highlighted, good on some days, not so good on some days, really mean to my mother, but most times just really good to me. And as a, 6 and 7-year-old, it's very confusing because I love both my parents. It was really hard to get to those scenes, especially there's a scene where my dad is essentially kicking my mother out in the middle of the night and takes all her crap and throws it outside. To him, it's crap, but it's her life. And he was the last person that I told that I was writing this memoir. And again, I said it took years to write this memoir. And so for years, my siblings knew, my nieces knew, my partner knew, and my dad didn't know. And finally, when I realized, Penguin Random House Canada bought this book and it's actually coming out, I should probably tell my dad.
Right.
And so it was years later that I finally, had the meeting with him to tell him this was happening. And, I highlight that in the book. I'm sure you know that. But it was really hard because here's the thing about, telling your story and your truth and your mess. Someone's going to be caught in those crosshairs, right? So to tell my story, I have to tell other people's story who might not want their story told, right? And here's the thing. The way that I see them is not necessarily the way people see themselves. But here they are having to confront my impression of them on the page. And not only do they have to see that, the entire world or whoever reads it has to see that, at least my version of them. And so that's really hard for me, right? 'Cause I don't want to hurt my family. I don't want to hurt my father. But I don't think I've reconciled that. I don't know that I ever will.
I just before Nate jumps into the next question, I actually like how you said scenes, because that really is what makes great narrative nonfiction, right? You're looking at this, you're not just chronicling things, you're not doing the play-by-play or the game report, you're actually creating scenes in these chapters, and that's what makes this a great book, because you are actually making scenes. So I'm glad you referenced that. Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, and Perdita, how hopeful are you that this book sort of shows the need to, to support, different endeavors? I know done a lot of work with shelters and stuff yourself, just to do things that help foster equality of opportunity.
Yeah. So in this book, I talk about the fact that in November of 1987, my mother's pregnant and my sister is around 14 and I'm around 7. And because of, another spat with my dad, we show up on the doorsteps of the Denise House, which is a women's crisis shelter in Oshawa, Ontario. And that really changed the trajectory of our lives. And the way it did that is my mother finally had kind of autonomy. She had her own place that was safe. And they gave us a co-op unit in Pickering, Ontario, so we had to move. But that's when my mother got traction, and that's truly when the climb to upward mobility began. That's when I first found sport, when I was 9 years old. But it is important to be able to give back, and a portion of everything that I make on the sale of this book is going back to the Denise House, because I want to, pay it back somehow, and I don't know that I ever will be able to. I think the way we live our lives is paying it back. But I think sometimes there's shame in people admitting, my family lived in a shelter or my family needed to go to the food bank, and people feel that there's a stigma around it. And I hope by us saying we needed this place rescued us and saved us, that it kind of dismantles any of that shame that people feel around it.
Excellent. And maybe an awkward segue on my part, but switching to sports, I sort of wanted to know, you talked about, I think it was Kurt Taylor being a coach who's like, you are going to run the hurdles. What are the subtle but crucial differences in skill sets between a sprinter and a hurdler?
We're better. I know I'm going to get in trouble for that from my sprinter friends, hey? So, yeah, you know what? I think the hurdles are so technical. Of course, the sprints are technical, but with the 100-meter hurdles, we have this is how I liken the race. So it's 100 meters, there's 10 hurdles. And I look at my lane like a minefield. Each of the lanes is a minefield. And each of those hurdles are bombs. If you make contact with any one of those bombs, they'll detonate. And if they detonate, you'll go down. And so the race is very risky. There's so many built-in hazards into the race. And we need the speed of a world-class sprinter. So you can't just be someone who doesn't have speed and show up at the hurdles. You need the speed of a world-class sprinter. But you also need that technical mastery and proficiency, and you need to be able to make decisions at speed. And if you make the wrong decision at speed, it costs you. But if you make the right decision time after time, you can win. And I love that aspect of the sport. Every single takeoff over the hurdle can be different, which means there's so much room for improvement.
Well, one race you definitely didn't need any room for improvement on was in 2003 in France when you won the World Championships. I want to ask you about that race, and in particular the dip, which is described as you calling your family before the race and them giving you some advice on what to do to win, which is kind of contrary to the mechanics that you are actually kind of trained with.
Yeah, so in 2003, I get the World Championships in Paris. I'm the youngest in the 100-meter hurdle final. But yeah, less than probably 3 weeks before, I was at the Pan American Games in Santo Domingo, and my mom and my brother happened to be watching that race, which was like really the warm-up for the World Championships. And I lost. I got second. And I remember calling my mom and my brother, and they're like, man, you could have leaned. If you leaned, you could have won. So then I took that information to my coach in Paris as we were preparing for the rounds. And he kind of dismissed that. He didn't want me to lean at the line. He just thought, well, if you're ahead, you don't need to. But I never forgot how adamant my brother and my mom were. And they're not, Olympic level or World Championship level coaches, right? But they saw what they saw, and it was so on point. And so I thought, well, Gary doesn't want me to lean, but I'm gonna take that information. And if you ever watch that 100-meter final in Paris, in the Stade de France, in August of 2003, you see how I won. I won by like the width of a dime, based on me just simply leaning and throwing my every part of my body to the line. Had I not, I would have lost to Bridget Foster of Jamaica, who was right there, on my heels, or side to side with me, rather, I should say. So that really made a difference for me, and it's something that I don't even know that Gary knows this happened. My coach,
he does now.
Know, I guess. Yeah, he knows now. Bad advice, coach. Bad advice.
The armchair quarterbacks out there are very happy to hear that. Hey, listen, the guy who's screaming at the TV sometimes, he might know what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to keep it moving here. And obviously, if we're going to talk about hurdles, we want to talk about what happened in Athens. And I watched your interview with Nam from last June on TVO. And you referred to the Athens race where, you hit the first hurdle in the 100-meter final, which you had a really great shot at winning. And you referred to it as devastating at the time, and then it turned into a pool to draw from. I just wanted to know when it became a pool to draw from.
Yeah, when did it become a pool or a well of strength?
Yeah, well, I think that was what the word you used was, a well.
Yeah, I think, the well of strength. That's a really hard thing, because I wish I could give you, Neil, like a point in time and say it was this year and this.
Right.
I think it was, if you think about like a well, like sometimes it can run dry, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes it can kind of like get full again if it rains. Yes. And I guess what I'm trying to say is like it's constantly something that I'm drawing from, but sometimes, the well is fuller on some days than others. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, but I think to answer that the best way I can is it just took years. It took years. But there are moments when I still reach back and I really need to like quench a thirst or really need to, get some strength from there. But the well's like not as, deep as I'd like it to be.
Right.
But it's still there. There's still something, right?
Right.
And so for me, I think even till this day, like there's some days where Athens feels like a huge sense of honor and pride, and I showed my character. And there are still days where I wrestle with the fact that, my gosh, like, what would happen if you had just gotten over that first hurdle, right? And I still wrestle with that. So I don't ever want it to seem like, oh, I'm totally at peace and it's fine and it's great. Like, no, like I'm candid and I'm honest with it. It will always be the thing that got away. But am I like fiercely proud of how I handled it? Yeah. And I think some people would have used that race to kind of define them and maybe make excuses and that's it. But I'm like, I'm not going to let one day define me. But people mention it and reference it all the time. And it can be a euphemism, attached to it. Like, oh, okay, Perdita fell. She fell. And that's just been the attachment.
Well, it's
I'm not.
Go ahead.
Pardon?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not tethered to that day in that way anymore.
Well, you certainly aren't at all. If anyone reads this book, you absolutely are not.
Thank you.
What did your mom say on the phone to you after you fell short in that race? It was a very moving part of the book. What was her quote to you?
Oh, I have goosebumps just hearing you reference it because it lives in my soul. So the first thing that she said was, "You are the gold. You are the gold. Dry your eyes. Stop crying. You are the gold." Moments after I'd fallen in Greece.
Wow. Let's break it up with a little humor here, and we'll keep moving it along because I know we're eating into the time. But let's break that moment up with a little humor.
Yeah.
And your entire career may not have happened because of a race with a future Olympic bobsledder. Can you tell us about what happened in grade 8 and who you raced against and who beat you?
Yeah. So one of my biggest rivals growing up was Shelly Ann Browne. And if you don't know that name, you better get familiar with her because she's a force. But we were at the OFSA championships in high school, and she was my biggest rival. I wasn't a hurdler, but I was a sprinter and 100-meter runner, rather. And she and I faced off. And actually, no, it's elementary school. I'm taking you back. God, I raced her so many times. It's elementary school. I raced her twice.
Yeah.
So I'll take you back to the elementary school part.
Right.
Goodness, that Shelly Ann's still my brain, hey? So in grade 8, yes, I was like from grade 4 to grade 8, I was like the best in Durham region. But then over the summer going into grade 8, a new girl had moved into our town. Shelly Ann Browne. Still makes me kind of shiver thinking about her. She's so amazing. But I had won so much and people expected me to win. And so I go into this race at the Oshawa Civic Field and I get beat badly. I get dusted by Shelly Ann Browne. Now, it's not a huge win for her, meaning a huge margin of error. But when you're 13, it's your ego. You don't care. And so I quit track after that day because I was so embarrassed about being beaten because I'd never tasted defeat before. And I quit track for 2 years.
And returned successfully, but wow, it's just funny when it's just, to me, that's almost like the whole Michael Jordan not making his junior basketball team or whatever. It's those little things that I would have never have known that. Again, just keeping it moving. You said sport found you. You didn't really find sport. Now I'm paraphrasing, but I got to thank Nam too because I borrowed some of the base for my questions off your previous interview. But can you explain to us? And I'm sure some people will just be so frustrated knowing that how easily athletics came to you and kind of how casually you took the great news around it. For example, when you were getting all these athletic scholarship letters, I think your boyfriend at the time was kind of telling you, hey, this is a big deal. And at that time, you didn't really look at it that way. And it was the same with, I think, the Olympic trials. You had a real shot at making the team, but at the time, it wasn't something you're really aware of. So how easily did this sport come to you?
You know what? I have to thank God for perspective. I was just talented, and I can say that now without feeling like it's a cocky thing to say, but I was just really talented. But what was my talent is when I wanted to turn it on, I was really competitive. I was really hungry. But the problem was I didn't turn it on all the time. I also, because of my mom's experience, right? She was a young woman who came to Canada had a lot of, us as her kids. She didn't have sport growing up. She couldn't have sport growing up. So when I'm starting to do well in sport, in gym class, and, in track meets and whatnot, nobody in my family had a reference for what that meant or what that could do for us, right? It was like, oh, Perdita can run. Oh, Perdita can run. Okay. Well, who knows about the Olympics? None of my family's an athlete. No one does organized sport. So for us, we didn't really know. And it's what you just said. It was my boyfriend in high school who really wanted to get a scholarship and could hardly get any offers, who was the one who said, girl, if you don't take this, you're going to regret it one day. And then I realized the opportunity. And it was only because between him and my mom, they kept nagging me about it. And I really, after 2 years, just wanted it to stop. And so I went back, and then it took off.
Yeah, and one reference point with your mother is the reading we would like you to grace us with, Perdita. Now, just some quick setup. This is, I guess, you're in high school. You've dominated at OFSA, which for our listeners outside Ontario was the Provincial High School Federation. All three of us went to OFSA, although I think my basketball playing time probably lasted about as long as a 100-meter run.
Yeah, I don't think mine or your experience at OFSA would compare to what was happening with Perdita.
Yeah, we're the one on the spectrum, and you're the 100. But yes, you've got an opportunity to go with your track and field club to California, but it costs money, and then this happened.
So yeah.
So I'll read. Yeah,
please.
I was disappointed because I so badly wanted to see what I could do against talented American runners. It made me wish that our family had more money, but I dared not make Mom feel bad about not being able to send me on the trip. A few weeks later, I was standing in the large front atrium where all the cool kids hung out after school, and I suddenly heard Mom's loud, pitchy voice echoing from the hall. "Where's Perdita?" Her maternal sonar honed in on me, and she sprang my way. "Oh, Perdita, there you are, honey," she said, as though tracking me down was some great miracle. "What are you doing here?" I asked. A dozen or so loitering students were watching us. I wasn't embarrassed, just surprised. Mom never came to my school. "I won the jackpot at bingo," she exclaimed. "Now you can go to California." Beaming, she stretched her hand out to reveal a collection of crisp $100 bills. "It's $500. Now call Coach Taylor and tell him you have the money." Her words dripped with pride, with a syrupy kind of love as she pinched the money into my palm. I was grateful, of course, but I also wondered why Mom had to tell me this at school and not at home later. What I failed to realize then was that it meant so much to her to be able to do this for me. She just couldn't wait.
Wonderful. And I'm torn about, I've got a mom who is a coach and a sister who is very athletic. I'm torn about who I'm going to buy the book for first. Now,
you buy both. That's the answer. Come on.
That's true. That's true.
Simultaneously.
It's the Scottish heritage. I'm parsimonious. Now you can only speak for yourself, but I wonder how sports athletes of your generation now feel sort of obligated to support. And you're seeing a lot more athlete activism among the generation that are all now in their early 20s. How much of is there a sense of to sort of boost what they're doing and sort of calling out things that they need to see it needing to change?
Say it again?
Just in terms of supporting athletes who are activists but are active right now the next generation.
I think there's a climate right now where athletes can really use their voice and their platforms without fear of retribution, fear of losing sponsorship and being unpopular. In my era, and especially the eras before, my goodness, you use your voice to stand up for your rights or human rights and other things, you're vilified. Shut up and play ball and dribble wasn't actually too long ago when that was said to LeBron.
Right.
But I think right now, this generation is not going to take that crap. This younger generation is saying, I have this awesome platform. I have influence. I have the ability to change this, social consciousness. And they know there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of privilege that comes with that. And they're just really using it. And I feel really inspired by this generation. I feel like they're really empowering each other by doing it. And so I really think that we're not going back. We're not going back to don't speak up about things that are going on. Don't, because you're not just an athlete, right? You're a human. You're a black man first. You're a white, you're a black woman first. Mm-hmm. And so those things don't necessarily disappear just because you're an athlete. Those problems, those issues in your community. And I think athletes are really understanding that they have a sense of responsibility, and they're using it.
Perdita, you know what I'm really proud of right now? We are right on time. We are at the 20-minute mark, and we have 2 questions left. So I'm going to pat myself on the back. Sorry, and I want to. Yeah, Nate's told me I always say I want to ask. I'm just going to ask. I got to stop saying I want to ask. So your daughter is going to grow up completely different from at least the last 2 generations of your family, yourself and your mom. So you value the grit that came as a byproduct of your upbringing. Is it possible in any way to pass that on, the grit? Do you want to pass that on to Nova?
That is a really, really great question. I've never been asked that by anyone, but I've asked myself every day almost since she's come here. Because I do feel like my story, the grit of it, the struggle of it, has shaped me, and it's actually fortified me. It's made me stronger and better. And I do wonder if, Nova's growing up with a really nice house, and she opens the fridge, which she can't open the fridge, but when we open the fridge, there's tons of food there, and there's stuff. And she is a lot more privileged than I. And I wonder, am I raising a kid who's going to be like a brat, right? And I wrestle with that, and I don't have the perfect answer for you, but I'll tell you where I am with that. I want her to have a lot of the grit that I have, but I don't know if it has to come through struggle. I don't know that it has to come through suffering and watching my mother suffer, although it has shaped me and it has scarred me. But I think I can give her some of that strength, how I talk to her, sharing those stories with her, and making her really appreciate the struggle that the generations before her had to go through to give her the life that she has and that she will have. And so I don't necessarily think that the struggle has to fortify you. I really think it's how you decide to live and how you decide to be and how I can mold her. So I think she will inherit some of that by virtue of being like a Felicien woman. She's going to have that. But it is really my job to make sure that Nova really pays homage in how she lives to me as her mom, to her grandmother, and to her great-grandmother who hasn't been here for decades. But I do think she will have that grit in her.
Well said.
And I sort of wanted to ask the Olympics, one question with respect to the Olympics we wanted to ask. Now I'm doing it, Neil. It just, the way the effect it's had on the delay has had on the athletes, especially sports women who have had to, pause life and family goals. Like, what would you hope the public understands about that? Because, we're all people too,
Yeah. It's, unless you've lived this experience, this lead up to an Olympic Games, I think you'll have empathy, and you'll be like, oh, that's really bad, and you'll feel it for them, but you won't truly understand what they've had to give up. It is completely disorienting to have this happen. I think the silver lining is, if you go into Tokyo as an athlete, is, well, everyone's in this boat, everyone's in this ship, so it's fine. But just the mental aspect of it, having to prepare for a whole year in such an unconventional way, it's heavy. It's really heavy. Then, the IOC has recently said, well, no overseas spectators. So now you don't even have your support, network there. No mom, no grandpa, no dad, most likely not your husband, your aunt, nobody there that knows you. And you'll be in these stadiums that are, probably empty. And we know that we'll feel the support of Canadians from thousands of miles away. But there is something about the electricity in the stands. There is something about me being in Paris in 2003 in a stadium that's, more than 60,000 people, and seeing the teeny tiny Canadian flag up in the rafters in the nosebleeds, and seeing that hand just waving that flag for me. One of maybe a couple, but it was there. And I saw that, and that gave me a little bit of spark. Okay, yes, wow, goosebumps. They don't have that. Now, does that mean they'll perform bad? No. But the point of it is that they really are losing something, and they've lost a lot. And, if you're sending your young child to compete in gymnastics or artistic swimming and they're really young and you as the parent aren't there, I would feel that. Right? If someone said, nobody's going to the Olympics and you can't be there, what? I can't be there? So it's disorienting, and it's really, really tough. It's difficult. But what I will say is our athletes can get through it, and they can do it. And my advice to them is this. I'm 40. I've been through the gauntlet, right? So I can tell you some of the things that I regret, and there aren't many. But the one thing is I would kind of rush to what was next. Like, what's the next championship? Okay, what's the next meet? What's the next thing? And I didn't stop enough to say, well, what is now? Stop and enjoy what is now. Even if Tokyo is not perfect, even if the buildup is not perfect, you don't get this chapter back. You don't get this moment in time back. All you have is now, so really soak that in and do it. And all you can do is prepare as best as you can. You have to leave it at that. And you have to be at peace with that. It is what it is.
Thank you so much, Perdita. I just want to say in closing, first of all, when you read that portion of the book that Nate prompted you, I wanted to ask you about the audio book, because I could tell you had all the voices down. You were talking like your mom, so I'm sure, is that out, the audio book coming out as well? Are you narrating that?
Yeah, it's out, so you can pre-order that now on Audible, and I do narrate it. My friends say, you're so pageantry. I'm like, yes, darling, it's my art, and that's how I present it. So I become the characters. I used to want to be like an actress when I was young, so this is me reliving some of that. But it's out.
No wonder you and Andy vibe so well on Road to the Olympic Games.
Thank you.
In closing, this isn't a question, it's just a closing and a thank you. And one thing your mother and daughter can both agree on is that you definitely didn't make foolishness of your life. So thank you for joining us today. And I know you're really busy with the show right now. All around?
Yeah, all-around champion.
All-around champion,
yeah.
Yes. So, we'll let you get back to that, and thanks so much, and good luck on the release. I'm sure it's going to be a hit.
Thank you both. Appreciate this chat. It was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Perdita.
Thanks, Perdita.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.